Okay, we're back. We're back with part two for Professor Augusto Buchweitz. Did I get your name right?
That's good.
You know
That's
I
fine.
have phonological processing problems. Okay, so
It's,
we're having a
there are too
fascinating.
many consonants.
Well, talking about this continent, let's go to your continent of the continent of Brazil. So we're talking about this is universal brotherhood stuff that
Oh yeah.
this is not good of what we're doing with language all over the planet. But
No.
you've been down there. You had a reading clinic down there. What did you learn from down there that applied back up here? And you're talking about brotherhood of man stuff. You're talking about the human condition
Yeah.
and us reading and how important it is.
It's true. We face some similar issues with the implementation of how kids are supposed to learn to read. And for 9 years we ran a reading clinic as part of our longitudinal study, because once we started going to schools and seeing that 50, 60, sometimes 70% of kids there in second and third grade could not decode a single word, it was hard for us to move forward, thinking about, okay, because we wanted to find the kids longitudinally who were dyslexic. But if 2/3 of your kids are not reading by third and fourth grade, how do you know who's dyslexic? You don't. They're lost in that middle, right? So we decided to branch out, in addition to following up on kids. It was about 300 kids at first and ended up being less than 150. We said, okay, let's do something different. Let's start a clinic where families can reach out and we'll evaluate their kids who are between 9 and 12 years of age and are struggling to learn to read. And let's try to figure out if we can find who's dyslexic. So over about 9 years before I moved back here, I would say we had over 3,000 families reach out to us. About 2,000 of those actually went through the early screening over phone. And from those 2,000, we, I think, actually evaluated where they would come in and do a first, decoding evaluation, about 1,000 kids. And then about 500 would actually go to the full evaluation. And of those, we diagnosed about 150 kids with dyslexia out of 3,000 families that reached out. And those kids participated then in the brain imaging study, which was the first brain imaging study of dyslexia in all of Latin America. And that, being part of this network of scientists was important for us too. And dyslexia is the same, it's the same type of brain differences, anatomically, functionally. It's the same thing that we find in Portuguese as you find in English, in Italian, in French, whatever other language you're talking about. But the important thing to us was to see that there are so many kids not reading. And most of them, it's just an issue of they're not getting the right instruction, because a lot of times we couldn't really come to a conclusion for the diagnosis. And we would try to get the kids into some remediation program. And then after 6 months, if they showed very little improvement, they would come back, and then we would, have more information, better information, to figure out if they were dyslexic, right? Because if you're not dyslexic, with the right type of instruction, you should see that these children do move forward and learn to decode and learn to read a little faster. Of course, if you're doing it by the age of 9 and 10, and the average age of the kids who reached out to us was 10.5 years. So this is a child who has been in the public education system, which in Brazil starts at pre-K, for 6 or 7 years. And no one knows what's going on. And I think this is also true in the US, that we don't do much in terms of evaluation during pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade. There isn't a lot in terms of following up on early literacy milestones and what the kids are learning in a systematic way. So by the time they get to an evaluation like ours at the age of 10, we are nearly in the dark about whatever happened before, except that they're not reading. It's extremely traumatic for them. And they're either failing or being held back. when they don't necessarily need to be held back. If someone teaches them to read and actually accommodates for the fact that the dyslexic kids, for example, just need a little more time. And
Well,
this is
well, I
this is
don't.
important.
I
Sorry.
see the problems. I see the problems we're talking about. But you've been to, you visited hundreds of schools across our country and in Brazil. In the highly effective schools, and let's talk about what's working.
Mhm.
Do you see commonalities of what we know is going to work and what school districts can do, what decision makers can do? What's working?
Well, I think here in the US, people are waking up, right? And because some of the pressure is coming from parents and other advocates that actually vote, and then the politicians will wake up a little bit, right? Because these are the people who are going to vote for me, are saying, wait, why is my child now, 9 or 10 years of age and not reading, right? What's going on? Because families entrust the school with that task, right? Of course, parents are supposed to be involved, they're supposed to help, but the one institution, let's say, entrusted with this is the school, right? That's, the people who went to school to learn how to do this. And the issue there is they're not being taught how to do it. You have a whole system that, prepares teachers to teach children to read, but they don't know how. I mean, they don't even know how we learn. There isn't a lot of cognitive psychology being discussed in schools of education, especially in Brazil. There isn't a lot of updating in the theories that are, discussed. There's still not, I'm not disregarding what Piaget and Vygotsky and some of these earlier researchers do, but there's a lot more stuff that's been done after them that is a lot more up to date. And it never makes their way in. As a teacher, as a professor in Brazil, I tried to propose a course on cognitive psychology for education for years, and it always got blocked. I think after I left, it finally got approved, but I think that's telling, right? There's a lot of resistance to change, and this is human nature too. I think we could even get philosophical here. We don't like to change a lot, but I think we have to, because if kids are going to school full time, families are trusting you with this task. Of course, it's not just the teachers to blame, right? But the part that they're supposed to do, if it's not being done right, there's a problem, right? And I think teachers a lot of times are naive to this. I don't want them to think that they're at fault. In those great stories that Emily Hanford produced for Sold the Story, there's a lot of teachers coming in there and saying, I wasn't taught how to do this. I was doing it wrong.
So
And teachers
So to that teacher, or to those parents, but let's go to those teachers.
yeah.
Now the teachers kind of know. I mean, 'cause, if we had a factory, you and I had a factory, and we were turning out 2/3 of our product wasn't up to code,
Yeah.
or we had an airliner that landed a third of the time pretty good, the other two times not so good. So we know that. What should your advice to those teachers? What should they do? What should they do? What should they're going to
Well,
rock the boat to their school? They're going to learn more.
it's hard. It's hard because whenever you bring phonics back to the table, there's a lot of resistance. And that the story about Sobral that I told you in the previous episode, they use phonics, but they never said it. They never mention it in any of they did it sort of in the backdrop, because they knew that if they publicized it, it would get a lot of resistance. And when we talk about that one city, a lot of people say, wait, they don't use phonics. Oh, yes, they do. They just don't say it, right? So of course, what do I say to these people? I think I don't think I have the right to give people advice. I just think I acknowledge that it is hard, because once you want to break with a tradition that is wrong, it's hard, because a lot of people are vested in them, and you're telling these professors and other people that they're going to have to change the way they teach, in the schools of education, and no one likes to hear that, right? And then you get into this quagmire of it's not democratic. You need to listen to both sides. You need to consider all the options. Well, I think again, in no other field would you accept listening to options that don't work, right? I think that if you put your children in a school of music, in a sports class, imagine just showing them how to swim. Just watch me swim. Now I'll just throw you in the water. Just go. Well, it's not going to work. You need to teach the fundamentals, right? We would not accept it. But of course, I think also a lot of it has to do with parents. A lot of parents don't know and don't have time. And unfortunately, the time is money, money is time is true because a lot of parents are just trusting the schools with this, and they don't know that their child should be reading by the age of 7 or 6. And they don't know what level of literacy they should be. That they at the age of 5 they should know all the letters. They should begin to identify the first letter in the word. They don't know this.
Well, Augusto, I think before the pandemic happened,
No.
you wake up, you're busy, you got,
Yep.
you got stuff happening, you get them breakfast, you get the kids out the door, packed out the door, you put them in a yellow school bus, forget about it. Those people are going to teach my kid how to read. That's what's going to happen. It wasn't until the pandemic when the kids were home that was a wake up call. That was one of that Emily Hanford, the
Yeah.
internet. There's a lot of different things. I want to talk to you about the social justice issues of our time, which is literally being able to read. Literacy is gives you social.
Oh, more and more. I mean, it's power, right? With the internet, with all the text out there and information, and the fact that uh, you have the opportunity to learn by yourself and be more self-reliant. All of those things depend on your ability to read. And the pandemic was a wake-up call in Brazil too, because what happened there in public schools, a lot of them was on Fridays, the teachers would send sheets of exercise for the parents to do at home with their kids. There wasn't even internet availability, online courses in a lot of the public school systems. So literally what happened is there are 2 years of nothing for a lot of kids, right? And then you want to address, let's cut this part.
Okay,
I forgot what I was going to say.
no problem.
Oh, all right, I know. I want to talk a little bit about graphic. And one thing that happened during the pandemic, for years, for 5 or 6 years, we were responsible for the Brazilian version of an early literacy app. And I'm not going to say here that the app is going to teach a child to read. That's impossible. You always need a teacher. You always need interaction. We are social beings. I think one thing we learned from the pandemic is distance learning for kids doesn't work, no matter what you tell them. It doesn't work. Kids need to socialize and be with the teacher and be in class. Now, we only during the pandemic were we able to release the Brazilian version of Graphogame, this Finnish app, which is available in several languages, for free because the Ministry of Education helped us release it. And it was one of the most downloaded versions of Graphogame in the world because kids had nothing. And they at least had that one early literacy app to play with. Now, I'm not going to say it remediated things, but it was just telling that a lot of people were just desperate to do something. And most teachers didn't even know what to give parents because they weren't taught. And the way we got through to families was usually it was just families downloading. There weren't schools districts adopting it, telling their parents, download this app and let's work with this for a couple of weeks or a month or two. And the resistance to Graphogame, just like to any early literacy endeavor that focuses on phonics, is clear. It gets labeled very early on, and if governments switch, it's just the app that the other guys did. And so there are so many barriers, and if it's really hard, for people out there trying to break this barrier. There are a lot of great people in Brazil trying to do this for a long time. They get shunned, they get stunted, they get booed out of places. Because it's hard for people to change, and I really don't know that I know what the best answer is to how to approach teachers. But I think that if parents wake up to it, that's a whole different story.
Well, I got an idea of how to do it. And, one of the reasons we made our film is we have a call to action at the end of the film. We have the advocacy toolkit at the film, and you you're going to be
We had
there.
a Harvey in Brazil,
Well,
Harvey and Emily Hanford. If we had you two in Brazil, I think we could start turning things around.
well, you're gonna get us over there. You'll get us there, and I have a cameraman and a producer from Brazil, so we'll probably end
All
up
right.
there. So, but I think the thing is, let's talk about Bridgeport, Connecticut. Let's talk about everything you've said. How do we get the teachers? We want the teachers to realize that we understand. We know that teachers
Yeah,
are caring, empathetic people,
of
and we
course.
give them our kids. We want
Of
the
course.
parents to realize that we can come here. Everybody doesn't have all the answers, but if we come together, and we want school administrators, um, uh, elected officials,
Yeah.
um, talk to me about uh, after our film plays. We're going to have a panel discussion. You're going to be on the panel with some of Connecticut's great minds that are working on it. What would you like to come out of? How, if you had a crystal ball, you got a crystal ball over there, Professor. So come on, what's going to happen afterwards? Who's going to come, and what will we be talking about?
I'm not sure. Harvey,
So
help me out.
I mean, we're going to have this. I don't know who's gonna walk in the door that day.
Oh,
I'm assuming
oh,
it's gonna be
from the screening.
for after the screening,
Okay.
we're all going to be there, and this is we're hoping this is playing before this screening, but there'll be other screenings and other times where people come together and
Yes.
they get to meet professors, they get to meet
Yes.
educators. So in the perfect world, if you're talking to the audience,
Okay. I get it.
what would you say, and how would you change it? And you have a crystal ball and a magic wand. You get to change the whole entire world. So, and you can't fail. You're not going to
Oh,
fail. So what
I
are
don't
you?
want to. I don't want to have that
No,
responsibility.
but you're going to be that guy. So you're that guy. Come on, you're going to be talking. You're on stage anyhow. There. So you're going to be talking to the population. Who is in the audience, and what are you going to tell them?
I think the first thing I would like to say to teachers is that they are also victims of this entire misguided process. Because sometimes it may seem like we're saying that teachers are at fault. They're not. They're also a victim of something that, over the years has just grown as a beast in terms of its arms and its resilience to change. And teachers are also a victim of this. And so are the schools of education, right? Because once the system kind of pulls you in and tells you this is what we're doing, Columbia Teachers College, a year ago, they dropped the whole language. And we're not talking about some, university at, some corner out of, it's Teachers College. They're known worldwide. The whole language was still part of their curriculum of what they taught in there. So it's so strong that everyone who's part of this is a victim of this issue, this problem, and we have to break it apart in every level with the teachers, with the teacher training, which a lot of times works better if you do it outside of the regular channels, right? Especially in Latin America. With the parents, so they understand what they should expect. And I unfortunately think that when schools are failing, they are distancing themselves from parents and families in that sense of community, right? Because what do a lot of the great schools in the US have in common, other than most of them are in cities where, houses are expensive, so you pay a lot of taxes and you get the best school, right? That's one thing. I have a 4-year-old, and we're going through this process of finding a school for him here, and that's what you learn, right? If you want some of the best schools, you either have to move to a smaller town or to a city where you have to buy a $2 million home to get a good public school. So you ultimately paying. All right, but other than that, we need to break all of these tentacles, right? Of this misguided idea that children will magically learn to read. And we also need to understand that if they're not reading as early as they could, it all escalates. It's a snowball. As it gets harder to read because you're reading more complex text and you're not decoding, things just get worse. They're gonna quit, right? If not quit, they're just gonna, sort of be in the background, right? You never learn how to shoot the basketball, dribble it, do all the fundamentals. So when they're picking people to play, you're kind of like, oh, just let me sit on the bench here. Don't look at me, coach. I don't want to play, because no one taught you, right? So I think that if it doesn't come from all levels, we're not going to break it. Parents, teachers, because honestly, academia is not very good at helping change some of these things. And a lot of it has to do with this perception that academia is in an ivory tower, and sometimes it is, unfortunately.
So what will change it is the parent advocates.
For sure.
The teacher advocates, the teachers
Yes.
saying we demand
Ground up.
we from the ground up.
Ground up. From the ground up. And I think in Brazil it would be true too, because if parents knew and were made aware of this, and in some private schools it's happening, they're starting to ask, wait, hold on, I'm paying all this money, why isn't my son reading or my daughter reading? What's going on here, right? But then again, you always have the chain link always break in the weakest link or whatever, and that usually has to do with people who have families who are poor and don't have time and don't even know what's going on.
Well, I can tell you the secret sauce magic recipe where
I don't know either.
well, I do. No, I know. I just talked with we were just talking with Dina from Waterbury, and there they have the mayor, so it's top down, but they
Yeah.
and you're saying ground up. The thing is getting everybody involved. The whole team has to be involved. The whole entire fence. There can't be any weak link. There can't be any weak link.
I agree.
So
what I'm trying to say is one of the efforts recently in Brazil was sort of from the top down. Let me say that the way it was approached wasn't maybe the best way in terms of communication, right? And there was a lot of resistance to the government in other ways. But if you don't get teachers to buy in, it's not going to work, right? So how do you get them to buy in and believe in the fact that they have to change their approach without saying that they're to blame? You're not to blame. You've been a victim of this misguided conception about learning and teaching. And they have to buy in. If they don't buy in, because once they close that door in the classroom, they're going to do what they believe is better for the kids. And sometimes they're misguided, and they're not doing it because I honestly do not believe there's one teacher out there that would go, I don't want my kids to read. No, they want everyone to read. It's just they weren't shown that there are better ways to do it, better and more effective ways to do it. Not only shown, but given the tools. They are overworked. You can't just go and say, you need to use phonics. Okay, what does that mean? Like in Brazil, like these teachers work a lot. They don't get paid well enough. You need to give them training and tools and efficient ways to implement phonics so they can get started.
And the
right?
teachers are going to say their success is our success because they're going to watch the kids, not just to be a test, but the kid's going to be able to get past that first sentence. Is going to be able to respond to that paragraph, and the teachers are going to know it, and they're going to see it, and that's going to set the fires.
I think teaching a child to read is one of the most noble, beautiful things we can do. I've never done it, and I know I'm helping my son with the early literacy, and that's already, when he learns things, it's just so magical. But as a professor, I love it when I see my students learning and improving and doing things better than they did, a few weeks before. I don't think any teacher doesn't like seeing that. Maybe it's just you need the right tools.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay, and we've covered a lot of ground here, and I'm looking forward to being with you at the screening.
My pleasure.
What's one thing that you haven't said yet that you want everyone to know? The parents, the teachers, the administrators, the politicians. I mean, you were on fire. You're talking about we have the ability. So
we do.
So how do we do it?
It's hard because we have to be persistent, and there isn't just one thing that we need to do. But if you are advocating for early literacy, for changing the way we teach children to read. If you reach one teacher, right? If you reach 5 kids, you've done something. So we just have to keep going until we wake most of everyone up in every level to this. And again, changing the way we teach kids to read is going to help the process, but it's not going to magically make everyone read beautifully by 4th grade. There are several things that need to continue to improve as we move from decoding the early fundamentals to reading text, right? Just like teaching the fundamentals of a piano are not going to make you play a whole sonata. But without it, there's no way forward.
So what are you working on right now?
We're working on several fronts with the Haskins Global Literacy Hub, and one of them involves, we want to ask questions about why is it that bilingual kids, especially the ones from Spanish-speaking backgrounds, which usually are also poor families, are the ones falling behind in early literacy. So sometimes you look at school district numbers here in Connecticut, right? And in cities where you have schools that get 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10 on some evaluation website or wherever, but then when you look at schools in that same city and that other school is 5 or 6 out of 10, and you break the numbers down, it's one of two things. It's the school that takes in the poorer kids in the city, or the school that has the most Hispanic children, right? And it's interesting that bilingualism is usually perceived in cognitive psychology as something that is positive, right? If you grow up bilingual, you have more language tools, it's a richer environment. So what is it about these bilingual children that are struggling even more than monolingual children? And I don't think from a richness of the environment, it makes sense, right? Because ultimately they're speaking English, they're speaking Spanish. This is great for them, right? So I think our theory is, again, going back to the same issue, that there's no systematic evidence-based approach to how to teach these children to read and making good use of the tools they bring from different languages. Timothy Shanahan from the reading panel did a sort of a panel on bilingual early literacy. And I think we're still looking for the answers. It doesn't make sense, or it shouldn't be, that these kids are struggling even more than the monolingual kids, because in terms of, their, let's say, environment and the language, the sounds that they hear at home and in school, they have a bigger variety, right? So why is it that they're falling behind, and why is it that usually the evidence is that bilingualism is positive in the long run, or it's positive in terms of learning, it's positive in terms of your ability to switch and focus on things. But when it comes to early literacy, and of course there is the socio-demographic issue, but I don't know if that's the only thing, because kids who are monolingual and with about the same level of income seem to be doing better. So why is it that a bilingual child is struggling to learn to read? Maybe, I think it probably has to do with the fact that, we don't know how to systematically approach, teaching a child to read. And sometimes, the districts will teach in both languages, they'll choose one and then another. I don't think there has been a very systematic answer to this that shows the best way to teach a bilingual child to read is focus on this.
But this is our largest demographic group in the United States.
Oh yeah.
And we're failing them. We're failing everybody. I mean, we're failing.
Yeah, we're failing everybody, but it seems that even more so. So, for example, the city of Stanford is now over 50% Hispanic. The kids in every level, right? So, of course, at different levels, there are different issues to be addressed. But with early literacy, it's even harder. It seems we're failing them even more.
But Doc, I'm the dumbest guy in the room here. It seems
I don't
that
think
if
so.
I am. I am. So the bottom line is, if the teacher's speaking English in kindergarten and first grade, and at home they're speaking Spanish, they're not practicing their English, they're not practicing their Spanish, they're not practicing their letters. If mom, the first teachers are the parents, and if the parents aren't included with what the school's doing, I mean,
Mhm.
have you guys been looking at that the parent relationship with the educator?
That's an important question. That's not what we've been looking at. The goal is that we want to record their language interactions at home and in school, and try to quantitatively find, you know, are they different qualitatively, quantitatively, and probably not, right? That's the first issue. But I think that, some of the schools do a lot of great things. They have uh, people who are, entrusted with the task of helping kids learn English and acclimate to this environment, right, when they only know Spanish. And I don't know what the answer is, but I do think that it has to do with the fact that there isn't a systematic, proven approach to this is a way that if you follow, you know, this direction, you will get two-thirds, three-quarters, or most of your bilingual kids to learn to read.
So
And I don't know what it is.
you guys
A
need
lot.
more you guys need more data, but you guys are thinking of sending a couple PhDs home to their house and record them? Like people are going to be
Well,
like,
actually, the way it works is there's this great device that they wear in a vest, and it just keeps recording what they're doing and talking. And you don't even need to go with them.
so
It just goes home with.
you're bugging their households.
Well, I mean, parents are aware, and they will have to sign a consent, and they even get we don't listen to the entire conversation because the software breaks it down into how many words and et cetera. And if the parents say, they get a sheet where they can say, I don't want you to use the data from 7 p.m. to, in my house, it would be from 5 to 6, which is bath and dinner time. And when hell breaks loose, so I'd probably say, do not listen to 5 to 6 p.m. And they can say that in a sheet, and then we'll just discard it. There's, of course, a lot of ethical issues that are dealt with, and we don't do this unless teachers and parents are aware and agree, right? But the way it works is they wear this little vest with a recorder, and that records their language interaction.
But
It's not the entire answer, but I think I would like to know that it doesn't have to do with, a poor language environment at home. Maybe it does.
but that's I said it half in jest, but this is what the scientists have to figure out
Yes.
is so you're asking the question you're trying to figure out. So
Yeah. And I think a lot of cities are trying to address it. Stanford has a dual language committee, I think, trying to address the issue of how to teach, bilingual children to read. I think there's a lot of people out there who are concerned about this, right? And rightfully so. If the city of Stanford has over 50% of Spanish-speaking families in the school system, they're the majority of people here.